everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have John Allcock here, and he is talking about his book, 40 Things I Wish I Told My Kids. So welcome, John.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing sort of okay. If I'm going to be really honest. It's funny because I have a lot of different things that I'm juggling right now, and I did not have a chance to read your book until like 2 hours before the radio show, and I was completely stressed out, and I thought, all right, well, use the book as a way of de-stressing yourself, because this is the only time you have during a day full of meetings, so just use this time in a way to be calm. So I did that. I want to talk to you a little bit about your book, and then I want to talk to you about some of my favorite passages given my current state that I really enjoyed. So first of all, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the email. So what happened, from what I can tell from reading your book, is that you started off writing emails to people that were then forwarded, and then that became a thought of, hey, maybe I should create a book about this. Tell me a little bit about how this book started.
Yeah, so it's that way. What happened was I got very interested in mindfulness over a period of about 3 years. I was going through a challenging time in my life, and so I went to a number of retreats, silent retreats at Spirit Rock and at Thich Nhat Hanh's place in France. I read dozens of books on the subject, and I wanted to pass along, and I found it very helpful. And I wanted to pass along what I was learning to my 3 daughters. And I couldn't find a book, or even a handful of books, that I thought explained the principles clearly and simply, and in a way that a Western audience could easily understand. So I started writing them emails. On Father's Day of 2009 in a hotel room in London, I started, and I had in the back of my mind that it could be a book, but that wasn't my primary purpose. And so I wrote them emails for a couple of years, and it ended up being a couple hundred emails. And as you said, they sent them to some of their friends and their friends' parents, and pretty soon I was forwarding emails so much I figured I'd write a book.
I love it. Okay, so I'm just trying to envision sending my son who's off in college, that many emails.
Yeah.
So how many emails did you send your daughters over the course of these 3 years? Was it like one every month, or how often were you emailing them?
It was probably it was more frequent than that. It was probably like once a week or once every other week. It ended up being like maybe after a couple of years, it was probably, well over 100.
Wow.
Yeah, well over 100, because they were condensed down into 40. And the 40 wasn't magic. I didn't have that number in mind when I started the writing project. That's just what it turned out to be.
Wow. Okay, so you had 100 emails, but you said once a week, so over a course of 2 years. So they didn't come, so They must have slowed down. So you had 100 emails that you'd sent your daughter, and they read them. That's miraculous. How old were they when you were sending the emails?
They were all in their teens. They were in the younger teens to older teens.
Wow. Okay. And what was their response to the emails? They're like, "Oh, Dad." I mean, what would? Because I have 2 teenagers. That's why I'm just imagining. Okay, I do send my sons emails, but what was their reaction?
Well, the responses were varied. Varied in each individually, and varied over time, and varied based on the content of the email. Non-response was frequent, and so, but it was, it was an interesting experience, really.
I'm only asking because I also send emails not at that frequency. What happens for me is I'll notice something about them, or they're struggling about something, and I'm trying to figure out, at the time when they're having a hard time, it's hard for me on the, Johnny on the spot to give like the most well thought and considered advice. So oftentimes I follow up. My saving grace is following up an email. Like I know we talked about. So for example, my son Unfortunately, there was someone in senior year that committed suicide, and he was really like, "Why would someone do that?" And it consumed him trying to figure out why someone would commit suicide, and who had so much promise. And so, I didn't know how to even to answer that right off the bat. So it took me a little bit of time to think about it, and then I wrote him back with a response. And there have been several times, probably. And during his graduation, I collected probably about 10 emails that I had sent him throughout the course of his life, just noticing who he is and the things that he's done and kind of whatever was the wisdom that I had at that time. So that's why I was wondering how your daughters appreciated it. And it's funny
Yeah.
because my kids, I said, "So did you read it?" They're like, "Yep." I'm like, okay, that's it. That's all you can ask for. And sometimes it's like, yeah, mom, thanks. Or, thank you. Or, they always are so polite that they'll say something along those lines. But sometimes they may not even be ready for it, or they're ready. It's almost like when you read a book, you read it once and you understand it. And then you read it a second time, you go, oh, now I get it. And then you read it a third time, you're like, oh, now I get it. I didn't get it
Yeah.
those other two times. And so what's beautiful about your book is I had that same kind of scenario. I mean, I've read hundreds of books on this kind of topic, on Buddhism, mindfulness, and the thing that's beautiful about this, what you wrote, and I think the body of work that it's based off of, is that these are just they're truths. So you can write a simple version or a 100-page version, and the truths are still there, and they're still relevant, even for someone who's read literally like 50 of books just like this. Um, so I greatly appreciate you just synthesizing it down into 1.5 pages, which is all I could handle today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the you know the the basic purpose of the book, mindfulness, really wasn't a thing in the West when I wrote this.
Oh, I
Um,
see.
it,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, this was 2009. And so, mindfulness was kind of starting to be talked about in the West,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really an Eastern thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got on the cover of Time magazine in 2014, and in 2015 there were 100 articles in the New York Times about it. So that was after I wrote my book, before it was published, but after I wrote it. And so really, what it's an effort to do is to take what is, when viewed from the Eastern perspective, relatively esoteric principles, and pare them down so they're meaningful to a Western audience.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly speaking, I mean, since I wrote it, I thought that there would be quite a number of books that come out that would do the same thing, but there actually haven't been.
Yeah, there aren't a lot. The
So
other one that Buddhist Boot Camp. Have you ever read Timber Hawkeye?
yes,
Very
yeah,
similar kind of thing. He wrote letters to his friends,
yeah.
and based on that book, he self-published his book, and now it's super popular, and he's a wonderful person, and but a similar kind of thing because he was able to distill, and he was also from the legal field, so much like yourself. It's interesting. I think lawyers. What is it about lawyers? Because other book that you talked about was the guy who something in the Ferrari. The guy who became a
The monk who sold his Ferrari. Yeah,
yeah, wasn't he? He was an attorney too, right?
yeah. Well, it's a myth, but yes.
Oh, it's a
Uh,
myth. He's
yeah,
not
yeah.
really attorney.
Well, it's a fable. It's
Oh,
The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari is a book about a lawyer who turned the corner, but it's a fable.
oh, I didn't realize. So it's like a westernized version
Yeah, yeah,
of.
yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I was thinking about um, you and I was reading. I have a lot of friends that are lawyers. So, what kind of attorney are you? And it looks like an intellectual property. What's your kind of attorney are you?
I'm a trial lawyer who tries complex patent cases to juries. So
Okay.
my day job is explaining complicated things and trying to make them simple to normal people. So
Oh,
that's
interesting.
why, yeah. So it was kind of a natural for me to try to do the same thing with mindfulness.
Yeah. So it's basically um, something that you inherently have to do as part of your job is taking
Yeah.
super complex ideas. And so, a trial lawyer, I assume you're arguing on the behalf of your clients that patents have been violated. Is that right? Or what's
Or not,
okay,
depending
or not?
upon which side of the equation I'm on. But
Okay,
yes, either they're violated or not violated, depending upon whether I'm representing the plaintiff or the defendant.
okay. So, I was thinking about the things that you wrote, and then uh, the being a lawyer, and I thought, wow, I can imagine that there's all sorts of tension there. Because when I think of my friends who are the lawyers, they're different kinds of lawyers than yours, so it's a very different kind of thing. But it seems like there's a lot of planning, worrying, anxiety, thinking about the future. I mean, most of it,
Yep.
it's like thinking about the future and being in thought. So, how did that present itself when in 2009, when you were, doing your first meditation retreat at Spirit Rock or in France? How did that idea present itself, and how did you struggle with that given your occupation?
Yeah, well, that's why the book starts out the way it does, actually. And I think that my struggle is a not uncommon struggle. I think
Mhm.
in the West, we our default is that our mind thinks, and that's
Mhm.
all our mind does.
Mhm.
And so it was kind of a revelation to me to realize that the mind has a function other than thinking, and and that's kind of hard to understand and certainly hard to explain.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of why the book starts out the way that it does, because my feeling was, and I think it's been kind of confirmed through my, speaking and talking to people about the book, that my misconception was common,
Mhm.
and is common.
Mhm.
That most people in the West have a kind of very limited view of our mind's capacity.
Mhm.
And so I think the first thing to get people to understand mindfulness is to get them to understand that the mind has a capacity other than discursive thinking.
Hmm. Well, so what is so you're saying the Western conception of the mind, as I understand it, is about thinking and planning and organizing, and we're mostly in our minds and think and at work. Where I was in a high tech job, I was often thinking about planning, organizing, um, talking, strategizing. It's all kind of that kind of a mind. That's
Right.
how I define mine. And you're saying that we have more capacity beyond just that kind of ability to organize, plan, intellect, be cognitive abilities. So, how would you describe that simply to someone who's not familiar, who's a brand new lawyer who you think, wow, that person would really benefit from reading my book? How would you describe it to that person? That.
Yeah, so it's sort of like chapters 3 and 4. It's basically the notion that um, uh, we have an awareness capability that kind of operates underneath or behind or on top of our discursive thinking,
Mhm.
um, and that we if we choose to, it's like Superman.
Mhm.
Clark Kent can jump into the phone booth and come out with superpowers, and we're the same way. We can jump into the meditation position and access a superpower that is within us, that we don't know is there really. And it's
Mhm.
the ability to simply be aware and to release ourselves from being captured by the internal thoughts, internal stories, the inner critic that we carry around with us.
Hmm.
And so, mindfulness is one term for it. Awareness is another term for it. Um, it has to do with controlling our attention and where
Mhm.
we place our attention and what we do with our attention.
Mhm. Okay. So in my parlance, I think of it as something that probably it may be off-putting for lawyers. So, you think about there's the individual point of consciousness. So you actually have your thoughts, your beliefs, your your story, whatever you're going through on that day. And then there's this kind of infinite consciousness, which is beyond just one individuated point, where there's a truth beyond just one person's perspective, one person's mind. There's a greater mind. Is that the mind that you're referring to, or how do Buddhists refer to it in terms of awareness? Is that the same thing that you're referring to?
Well, that's a great way of thinking about it. You're talking more about a collective consciousness,
Yeah.
and that's true. That for sure exists. But for the moment, I like to just think about our own individual awareness or consciousness that operates below, let's just say, our thinking mind.
Ah, okay,
Um,
got it. So it's like sensory awareness. So my five senses, what am I smelling? What's happening right now? Is that what you mean? Your other bodily intelligence your emotional intelligence, your bodily intelligence, sensory. Is
yeah,
that what you mean?
yes. Let me say it a different way. So the way I look at mindfulness is it's the capacity to pay attention to our present moment experience, both internal and external, without judgment. That is, with an openness
Mm-hmm.
and a curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
so that we're not captured by that internal or external experience, but we're able to observe it in a non-judgmental fashion. So that's basically what I'm talking about. So it encompasses what you just described. It just encompasses the ability to pay attention to our bodily functions. Our breath is a very, very solid way of getting into the mindfulness feeling, but also our emotions, our thoughts, our stories. We have the ability of paying attention to all those
Mm-hmm.
things,
Mm-hmm.
but not getting wrapped up in them, which is what we normally do, right? That's normally.
Right. Right.
I think that's probably what you were doing earlier this morning before you started reading my book. You were probably
Yeah.
wrapped up in a number of internal stories that were creating a level of stress.
Right.
Um, and so what mindfulness is all about is the ability to pay attention to any facet of your experience in a way where your attention is focused on it but not captured by it.
Right. Okay. I get it. Okay. I've only done. I actually went to Spirit Rock. It was actually one of my first meditation retreats ever. Probably much like yourself, around 2009, right around the time when you went. So
Hmm.
it was interesting, and I wasn't really exposed to mindfulness, and of course, I don't spend a lot of time talking about it because mostly you're sitting there being silent. So,
Right.
um, they just gave me one simple instruction, which is to, it was a noting practice, noting
Hmm.
whether you were thinking, feeling, or um, sensing. I can't remember. Or thinking. Thinking, feeling, or sensing. I don't remember. And so I sat there, just like thinking, feeling, thinking, feeling. The hell is the purpose of this? Thinking. Okay, let it go. Let it go. And then at the very end, it was actually miraculous because I was present for about I don't know, for about 2 hours until someone at that retreat had a breakdown and started yelling at everyone, and that kind of snapped. It was a rude awakening for everyone. But these rude awakenings happen, so that's what I was going to talk about. So yesterday I had. I'm starting a lot of new things. So I'm starting a bunch of different new business projects. I have a remodel that I'm also starting, launching off my child into college next year. So there's a lot of new beginnings.
Hmm.
And I hit a point of overwhelm yesterday where literally, it, I kid you not, I had to paint the bathroom because the designer was coming over. I was getting ready for a client that was coming over like an hour afterwards. Then my landscaping person says, I need to have come over at the same time because I need you to look over these pieces of wood and tell you what needs to be painted for whatever. And then at the same time, I got an Amazon package came at the door, and I got a phone call, which I did have scheduled at that time at 2. And then during the phone call, it wa- like it where it was all clipped off like that, and I was like, okay, okay, like I seriously can't take this right now. And then she said, why don't you tune in and give me a sense of what you are feeling at this moment, with all the stuff that's happening. As a nutritionist, she's like, tell me what's happening with your food. And I was like, seriously, I'm sorry, I can't. Like, I can't, I can't tell you. I can't even like form a sentence right now, let alone think. Just tell me what I need to do for my to lose a little bit of weight because I gained 3 pounds. I, I really was just completely, utterly having a meltdown, and because literally all these things, and I joke you not, all these things are happening within like a hours period in 5 minute increments. It's just I thought I was gonna go crazy. Okay, so now let's go back to some of the ideas that you have in your book. Don't
Yeah.
be ruled by the tyranny of events. So that's the
Yeah.
first
There you go.
chapter.
I
And
was about to say chapter one was built for your day yesterday.
it was, and I was laughing because it says in here, and I find myself doing this. The idea that you mentioned, I will be happy when, and I said yesterday, like, I'm going to be happy when this remodel is over. Or I'm going to be happy when, but there's always something, right? So tell me a little bit of how you came upon this truth and what happened for you.
Well, I mean, that's really the cornerstone of, there are a number of reasons to do a mindfulness practice.
Hmm.
One of them is so that you are not ruled by the tyranny of events,
Hmm.
um, so that you realize that the experience of life has two components to it. One is the stimulus, and the other is your response.
Hmm.
Um, we don't have a lot of control over the stimulus, as you learned yesterday.
Yes.
You don't have control over the Amazon package. You don't have control over the phone jumping in and out. You don't have control over your schedule. You don't have control over the stock market going down. You don't have control over your boss getting mad at you.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things you don't have control over. And the quote that my book starts with is a quote from Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, where, the poor guy was in a German concentration camp
Hmm.
watching his family led to their death.
Hmm.
He didn't have any control over that. But he discovered that the response to the events is where our freedom lies,
Hmm.
because we do have control over our response
Hmm.
to it,
Hmm.
and so often it's our our beliefs about what we need to have to make us happy that control our experience, control our response in unskillful ways.
Hmm.
And so, as an example, your son's going off to college,
Hmm.
uh, and uncertainty is the
Hmm.
problem.
Hmm.
But uncertainty isn't the problem, really. It's your attitude towards the uncertainty.
Right.
Your attitude could be one of fear, or your attitude could be one of hope and incredible opportunity.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, the most uncertain thing in the world is when you're handed a present and you don't know what's in the box. That's
Hmm.
incredibly uncertain. It's
Hmm.
never sad or unhappy because you're always anticipating something good happening.
Hmm.
If you bring that attitude towards your son going to college, you'll have a very different mental state towards that whole experience than the one that you are probably now experiencing. So that's kind of the reason to do mindfulness
Hmm.
is it's great to relax you, but the more important thing that can be done is you create a space, and
Hmm.
instead of an automatic reaction that will put you in a negative mind state, you get to choose your response and pick intention that
Hmm.
will yield a healthier and happier mind state than the one that you may find yourself in if you react to things automatically.
Yeah, so I have in one of your chapters, you have a quarter of a second to choose your intention. You have a beautiful way of breaking this up where you said there's a stimulus. And so my son leaving, let's use that example.
Yep,
There's our
sure.
immediate internal response, which is my immediate internal response is sadness and grief. And third,
Yep.
thought. And I'm getting these because my eldest son has already left, so I already have broken a lot of these things down. So
Yeah.
just so it's not like it's going to sound mechanical, but it's not. So our immediate internal response was grief, then followed by just openness. But the thought that I had initially was, oh my God, who am I going to be without my son here with me?
Mm.
And then, what is my life all about? Oh my gosh. And then the fourth is we decide how to act. And I think what I've noticed, because I've had a bunch of parents similarly have had their children leave, or, first child leave. And some of them have gone kind of catatonic. Some of them
Yep.
have, like, I would say kind of aversion, or maybe they just don't, maybe there is no grief. They're just like, okay, it's fine. I'm actually loving life and playing golf. I'm like, okay, well, I guess you didn't love your kid that much since they're gone. I don't know what to think. And then, so you talk about aversion. And then at the end, you talk about this quarter second window. And this is probably more day in, day out when things are happening and a thought kind of comes in. Like, I feel overwhelmed. Like for me yesterday, it's like I cannot deal with this. At that moment
Yeah,
when the Amazon
The
package,
Amazon package
yeah,
and the
clip,
choppy, or the
yeah,
traffic on the way to work, or the guy cutting you off on the
yeah,
way to work. Those things.
yeah. That was just at the moment where I literally said, I just cannot deal. I literally said out loud, I'm sorry, I just can't do this. I cannot deal with this. I need to reschedule this phone call. And so had I thought and maybe that was the best thing to do at that time, but you're talking about having this kind of split second without judgment and to have kind of a bird's eye view or meta view from looking at that and to move from a place of intention. Um, so had I done that, I probably would have said, I'm really sorry. What I'm realizing is I'm in overwhelm and I just don't have any bandwidth to talk to you as much as I love these conversations. So I have to reschedule, and I'm really sorry. Um, that would have been a better thing than I'm like, okay, I can't deal with this. I think I need you to send me an email because I can't even hear what you're saying. She was like, what? I'm like, okay, just send me an email. I can't even hear you at all. Because I literally
Yeah.
couldn't hear her literally and then also emotionally because I was just overwhelmed.
So the point of the chapter that you're referencing is that you have a quarter of a second, but mindfulness allows you to expand that quarter of a second into really an infinite amount
Mm-hmm.
of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so um, if you get into the practice of paying attention to your experience and your thoughts, and particularly emotionally charged thoughts, you can realize you don't need to be captured by them,
Mm-hmm.
and you can place a intention in that space that will lead you to healthier thoughts and therefore healthier actions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what the whole book is about, really.
Yeah, so let's take an example recently for yourself. Like, give me an example where you use this quarter of a second, where the old John would have done something, and the quarter of a second John, mindfulness, and with attention and intention, uh, kind of reacted in a different way.
Well, I mean, my today was sort of like your day the other day. I mean, my
Okay.
daughter's calling me that her car died on the way down a hill, and she's at the car dealership trying to get it fixed. We're trying to figure out our Skype thing. I've got a hearing tomorrow, and the judge is calling and wanting all these things. And so, um, the space to create is merely okay. Here are a number of things that need to get accomplished. Anxiety and frustration never improve your ability to deal with the situation
Mm-hmm.
ever.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, anger is the worst. right?
Mm-hmm.
We tend to get angry when something we don't like happens, and
Mm-hmm.
there's absolutely no emotion in the world that makes your judgment worse than anger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so so that's where mindfulness comes in and allows you to just see these things for what they are, um, things that you need to deal with. And if you don't have time to deal with all of them at once, you deal with them in the order that you decide, and you allow equanimity to take the place of anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, and it the it doesn't change the things. The things are all the same.
Okay, so your daughter called. You have a big thing. I was like, I don't know what Skype is. They're like, ah, and then I actually couldn't find your thing, or I'm like, I can't even find John's Skype.
Right,
Ah, so okay, so we
right,
were
right.
both having this moment. What thought did you jump to? I just out of curiosity when all this stuff was happening. My daughter's car
Yeah, I just made a list. I just said, okay, call Rachel
planning.
back when I
Okay.
get off, and my wife's calling me because she's got something going on, and so I mean, it's
So you're triaging like an emergency doctor. So
yeah,
you're just
yeah.
like put a plan together, meticulously execute the plan. It will all get done. I mean, what are the thoughts? So the what were the thoughts? Is it like it's not all going to get done, or how am I going to get this stuff done, or I need to just was there any angry negative thought that happened, and then what was the split second conversion that you did?
Actually, I think the conversion is not allowing the event to create anxiety. That's
Mm,
that's that's really the part. The thoughts will. We have this kind of artificial distinction between thinking and emotions that in the West. There's no thought that doesn't come with an emotion,
mm-hmm,
um, and the thoughts that are the most troublesome, that hang around the most, that create the worst internal stories,
mm-hmm,
are the ones that have the most emotion.
mm-hmm.
Um, and one thing about mindfulness that you can do is release yourself from the grip of the emotional charge that accompanies the thought, and realize, the example I give in the book is it's only a credit card bill.
Mm-hmm.
You get a credit card bill that's 3 times larger than you expected,
Mm-hmm.
and next thing you do, you're imagining yourself out on the street because you can't pay all your bills or whatever. So your thoughts proliferate into a story. In that case, typically caused by a fear emotion. But mindfulness allows you to kind of take the emotional charge out of the thoughts, and deal with them just as they are, instead of the old saying, making mountains out of molehills. We make a lot of mountains out of molehills.
Mm. Okay, so let's actually and let's do it. We went through mine. I'm going to go through yours and pretend I'm you. Okay, so it's like, oh my God, if I were you, if it were me, experience the same thing that you just experienced, what would happen for me would be, oh my gosh, how am I going to get everything done? Why is this all happening at the same time? Why? Why? Okay, how am I going to get everything done? Okay, I need to put together a list. Oh my God, I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to get all this stuff done. And then I would be the person that's in this book that you describe. I love the story. I love, love, love the story. You talk about a story where the person rushes into their kitchen, grabs a pickle
Oh,
from a pickle jar. Will you tell this story? Because I think this story is great.
yeah, no, that's actually that is what karma is all about,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
karma is our intention and action. And
Mhm.
so, the pickle story, and that's why it's in the subtitle of the book, actually, is, someone comes down in the morning, their mind state, their intention is one of hurry.
Mhm.
They're trying to make lunch for their kids, grabs the pickle jar out of the thing, makes it, puts it back, but because they're hurrying, it's cracked. It's a jar. It's not tight on the top. Next morning they come down, same thing. they grab the pickle jar. Well, because the day before their intention was to hurry, and their action was to therefore not put the jar on tight, they pull the thing out and it falls on the ground and smashes, all pieces. They hurry, try to pick it up, and run. Next day, same thing. They come down. They're in a hurry. They're trying to make breakfast for the kids, and they're in bare feet, and they step on a piece of glass that was left because they didn't spend the time yet the day before to clean up the thing. And so then they're in the emergency room. And so what does this tell us? It tells us two super important things about karma. One is karma is intention and action. And wise intentions generally lead to wise actions, which generally lead to a happier and healthier life. Unwise intentions, generally speaking, lead to unwise actions and to a less healthy and worse life. And so here, an intention to hurry rather than an intention to be present and mindful increasingly led to worse results on a day-by-day basis. So that's one thing. But then the other thing that people in the West don't recognize about karma is we can always change it. Mm-hmm. And so in the example that I just gave, the pickles, if she changed her intention the second day, it never would have happened. If she changed her intention the third day, it never would have happened. She wouldn't have been in the emergency room. Mm-hmm. So we always have the opportunity not to necessarily undo the results of our past actions, but to radically change our future by changing our intentions in this moment. And that will create downstream positive implications and actions in our lives. So that's the pickle story.
Okay, so let's fast forward from this to your life and my life right now. Everything is like, I got to rush around. I got to get off the phone. When is this interview going to be done? Like, I got to go. This woman's talking forever. Okay, so there's this thing that's happening. And then at the same time, if your attention and intention is to be present and not rush around, and your daughter, you have to call your wife, your daughter's car just broke, you have this big case, and you're going to get off the phone with me in the near future, how are you going to navigate in this kind of pause, kind of slow down method, and how does that look for you?
Yeah, so the way it looks for me is I'm present in this interview. I'm standing. I've got my book in front of me. I'm staring out the window. I'm nowhere near my desk or my phone or anything else. I've got a headset on. Mm-hmm. And so I've said to myself, okay, I've got to deal with these other things. Mm-hmm. That'll happen at 11:50. And then at 11:50, I probably will call my daughter back because that seems to be the most pressing thing. Mm-hmm. And then I have a call at noon that I have to take, and so I'll probably call my wife back right after that call. And no one's going to die in the interim.
That's true. Yeah.
There's not going to be any, irreversible harm done to anyone
right.
in the interim. And so this is a really good example where you can choose to be present and behave with some degree of equanimity or not. Mm-hmm. It doesn't change the external reality. The external reality.
What I love the most about that comment is the lawyerly take on this, because I love the irrevocable harm. I actually am going to have to adopt because that is the perfect. Because here's the thing: you think my boss used to say, "No child is going to starve, or no one's going to die." Which was like her litmus test. But I actually think irrevocable harm is really what we're really wondering about, right? I know no one's going to die and no child's going to die. That seems so remote. But what you really don't want is irrevocable harm.
Yeah. There's no harm that's going to be caused that can't be fixed.
Yeah.
By me not answering a phone at this second. I mean, it's, so... Yeah, so it really is chapter one, right?
Yeah.
Chapter one is don't be ruled by the tyranny of events, and most people are ruled by the tyranny of events. An
Yeah.
event happens, and they immediately react with an emotion that puts them in a state of stress or unhappiness, and actually degrades their ability to make wise choices
Right.
to improve the situation.
Hmm.
So it's really a double-barreled loss
Yeah.
to your life.
Yeah. I had one yesterday. My husband and I were talking, and he's like, "Well, you're just getting mad at me all the time." And I was like, and I thought about it. I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And I said, "Hold on," because I started like, it's like, hold the phone. Because I started like, okay, I'll tell you why I'm mad at you. Like every aspect of me wanted to go dive into the dumpster and pull out all the trespasses. And I said, hold on, because like the logical part of me is like, seriously, sister, this is not going to do you any good because you could spend this hour walking around the lake with your husband fighting and arguing about the trespasses both of you feel like you've put on each other, or you could just tune into your heart. So I tuned into my heart, and I said, "You're right. I have been mad, and I'm sorry." But it had that half second split moment. The thing that you say in your chapter. Most of the things we fear is imaginary, right? You talk, and I love this sentence. One helpful way to look at worry is an unmindful response to fear, because that's what happened, right? Like, oh, you're
Yep,
blaming me. Oh, now I'm going to now tell you every trespass that you've come up with.
that's right.
Just like,
That's right.
I have
That's
more
exactly right.
evidentiary proof that you're wrong and you deserve all the anger. You know, it's like
That's right.
fear came up, climbed in aboard. I climbed up, I wanted to climb aboard it, ride it through my imagination, and come up with every trespass. Not only was it that trespass, it was like every trespass in the 20 years of our marriage came up.
Of course.
And so it's like, and so that split second that I applaud myself for, I think, okay, don't go there. Just don't go there. Nothing productive is going to happen if you jump on this bandwagon. Just
Yep.
tune into your heart and think about whether what he's saying is true. It is absolutely true. Think it is true and see how you would respond based on it. And it did change things dramatically. So I love it. So we've been talking to John Allcock about his book, 40 Things I Wish I Told My Children's Mindful Messages About Success, Happiness, Leather, Pickles, and the use and misuse of imagination. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck with getting all of
Great.
your things done right after you get off the phone.
All right. This was great. This was really a fun interview. Thank you
Okay,
very
all
much.
right.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.